Hey everyone, and welcome to Ghosted But Make It Gay, the 18 plus podcast where things get creepy, chaotic, and just a little unhinged. I'm your host, Juno, and every week I dive into paranormal encounters, unsolved mysteries, myths, legends, and even cursed internet finds, trying to figure out if it's actually haunted or if we're all just delusional. Either way, don't expect a straight explanation. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first ever episode of Ghosted But Make It Gay. I'm your host, Juno, and you're wondering, who the fuck is this guy? Well, I am a super gay, super witchy, super fun, chaotic individual, which you probably won't believe me if I'm the one saying all those things, but believe me, it's true. And my pronouns are he, they. I am neurodivergent, and I really love the unknown, witchcraft, the occult, and all those things. But a little bit about me off topic. I stream on Twitch at Juno's Rainbow. That is where I do a lot of video games. I play a lot of horror games, Dead by Daylight, and just a bunch of, competitive games off and on, a variety, a sprinkle of stuff. So if you know me, you might know me from there. I also post a lot on TikTok when it comes to clips from that and YouTube Shorts, all under the same name, Juno's Rainbow. Why did I want to make a podcast? Well, I've been wanting to make a podcast for a long time now, and I couldn't really land on what I wanted the podcast to be about. And then I watched a horror movie recently called Undertone about a podcast that gets sent 10 audio files that are increasingly more creepy as they listen to these audio files. And as they listen to them, these audio files end up summoning a demon, entity, supernatural mishap into the host and co-host lives, making their life turn upside down. It's a great watch. If you're nitpicky about movies and plots and things like that, I do not recommend it. But if you like watching horror movies to watch horror movies and just enjoy a movie, then it's really great. If you can find it somewhere to watch it with headphones, I highly recommend, just because it does get very ASMR, very soundscapey, because that's the way that they filmed it, which is a lot different than a lot of movies where they rely on visuals and sound. This movie, audio is their main component with it being a podcast. But after I watched the movie, I was like, you know what? Spooky podcast it is. But I'm very unserious when it comes to a lot of things. So we are going to keep it a little bit different. There are a lot of supernatural and spooky podcasts out there. So we're putting a little LGBT and neurodivergent twist and lens on it. So as we talk about our topics each episode, we're going to look at them either through a LGBT, neurodivergent, or both perspective, since I am both. LGBT, I am gay, polyamorous, non-binary / gender fluid, gender non-conforming. I don't really have like a label on my gender that much, but and with neurodivergency, I do have PTSD, anxiety, and depression, while also having neurodivergency in my personality disorders, and other diagnoses that we don't need to get into. But just know that I am qualified with my own perspective take. So, yeah. So, with all that being said, the spooky and unknown has always come to me as something that's given me comfort. My roommate that I used to live with hated me because I used to try to summon demons into our house in the most horrific fashions during Halloween night on the witching hour with my spirit board and all this stuff. Always wanting to be haunted and experience the worst parts of the supernatural for myself just to experience it. Why? I don't know. But that's just who I am. I currently am a practitioner of witchcraft. I am a Celtic pagan, eclectic witch, dabbling in all sorts of things, leaning more in the Celtic pantheon when it comes to deities and practices. But I recognize all pantheons. And when it comes to the occult, um, I know my fair share about it. I actually have and own a haunted doll who is not like a poltergeist or active entity in the sense of Annabelle, but she is more of like a nurturing spirit in the sense of a good positive energy. Um, and we might talk about her on a later episode when we get into maybe a topic about haunted dolls. Who knows? We'll see where it leads us. But the other thing that I've always experienced is sleep paralysis. Um, Sleep paralysis has always haunted me ever since I was a little kid. And my first experience with it always gives me the worst chills. And that's actually what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm super excited to start our first episode with something that a lot of people can probably relate to, sleep paralysis. So let's just dive right in. So, what is sleep paralysis? For those of you who don't know, there is actually a clinical definition for sleep paralysis published, well, on multiple sites, but from what I found, from clevelandclinic.org, they have a published definition of sleep paralysis, stating sleep paralysis is when you can't move any part of your body right before falling asleep or as you wake up. It happens when your body is in between stages of sleep and wakefulness. An episode is temporary and only lasts for a few seconds to a couple minutes. It's a type of parasomnia. You'll likely feel scared or anxious during a sleep paralysis episode. When it ends, you may feel confused because you'll regain movement in your body as if nothing happened. Even one sleep paralysis episode can make you nervous about going to sleep. This can affect how you feel and function during the daytime. There's no treatment available to stop a sleep paralysis episode when you're in the middle of one, but treatment is available to reduce how often episodes affect you. And for anyone that doesn't know what parasomnia or parasomnias are a type of sleep disorder that causes abnormal experiences or behaviors during sleep. These can happen as you're falling asleep, during sleep, or right before you wake up. If you have a parasomnia, you might talk in your sleep, sleepwalk, have nightmares, wake up confused, not remember what you did during the night. When these events occur, others may think you're awake, but you're actually asleep. In the morning, you might not remember what you did while you were sleeping. So, that is like a clinical definition or dive into sleep paralysis. And people have multiple definitions when it comes to sleep paralysis at a spiritual level, at a supernatural level, and their own experiences. Um, Clinically, sleep paralysis is said to not be dangerous, but it can cause emotional distress during an episode. Some cases of sleep paralysis link to other sleep disorders, um, and it is estimated about 30% of people around the world experience at least one sleep paralysis episode within their lifetimes. So if you have not experienced sleep paralysis, I don't know if you can hear that, but I'm applauding you. Maybe I should get an applaud thing on my soundboard. You are one of the lucky ones. Um, Common symptoms of sleep paralysis do include sensations of pressure against your chest or moving out of your own body, hallucinations, and daytime sleepiness, all while the other ones are happening, not being able to speak or move any part of your body. Um, some things that healthcare providers have found that cause or may cause sleep paralysis is not enough sleep, irregular sleep schedules, sleep apnea, different mental health conditions like anxiety, bipolar disorders, personality disorders, post traumatic stress disorders, or panic disorders, narcolepsy, different medications like ones that treat ADHD, and substance use disorder. So, this is like all, overview of sleep paralysis, but we're not getting logical here, or we're not staying logical, I should say. Let's back up a little bit to when I was a kid. When I first experienced sleep paralysis, one, I didn't know that it was a thing, and two, um, there could be multiple explanations for why I experienced it. Um, Whether it was due to the fact that my parents were going through a divorce at the time, my dad was not um, being able to watch us in the morning when he woke up for work. So we didn't get like a proper wake up into where we would get onto the bus in school, me and my sister at the time. So maybe we weren't getting enough sleep. Maybe it was stress, anxiety. Maybe it could have been um, a couple different things about the house or our neighbors, I should say, that were watching us. Maybe there was a subconscious part of myself as a kid that didn't trust them. Or on the flip side of things, what this podcast really dives into, maybe it was a ghost. I always thought that as a kid, where we lived, me, my sister, my dad, and my mom at the time, was haunted. And maybe that whole street that we lived on was haunted because when we went to our neighbor's house in the morning, we would wake up at like 3 or 4 a.m. and then go to our neighbor's house to then get on the bus from their house to then go to school since my dad had to wake up super early to go to work. And he couldn't watch us in the morning and he didn't have like trust that we could be up by ourselves and get on bus in time. Um, this was like when we were really young. So, I was still like 7 or 8. My sister was like a year older than me. So once we were a little bit older, obviously we could, be in our own house. But I always thought that this neighbor's house, something was just off there. Something wasn't right. Um, and I remember sleeping in their living room. Or we would like go there to like kind of get like another couple hours or another hour of sleep or so. They would like turn on the TV in the living room and we would just kind of like fall back asleep. My sister, and I'm not sure, and if you're listening to this, sister, I'm not sure if you ever experienced it, but anytime I would fall asleep, I would experience sleep paralysis every time at their place. Um, it was like non-negotiable. I knew it was going to happen. And I always could hear this just thing breathing over me. And if you can just imagine like a dark mass that has like a long snout. I'm trying to think of like a it reminds me of a character from an anime somewhere, a monster from something, but I can't remember the name. If I think about it later on or in a later episode, I'll like bring it up. But I could just like feel it breathing over me, like it was like a dog or like something like more beast like. Um, and I remember feeling its breath. I'm just getting the goosebumps. I just never like had this sense of like safety there. I always felt like I was gonna die in a sense of like a kid's thought of like, oh my god, this monster is gonna eat me type of deal. And so sleep paralysis back then, it was horrible. And now to this day, I still encounter bouts of sleep paralysis here and there, on occasion. And my sleep paralysis nowadays, I don't know what causes it, but sometimes I use it and try to lead it into astral projection. And that's something that we'll end up talking about with some of these studies and folklore things and deep dive. So, yeah, with the astral projection part of it, um, it has been believed that sleep paralysis is something that leads into a wakeful, lucid dream state that could also be a step into astral projection. Um, Normally, when you're thinking about astral projection or you're thinking about meditation and lucid dreaming, you're thinking about trying to meditate while you fall asleep. And sleep paralysis for some people is like a state that your body gets into right before you get into the lucid dreaming part or the astral projection part. And that's where some people have issues getting into lucid dreaming or astral projection, because when the sleep paralysis happens, their instincts take over and they start to like get scared and they have to wake themselves out of this like state of paralysis. Um, and that keeps people from diving more into, lucid dreaming and the whole astral sense of it all. And it's kind of sad because, we we've created this fear around sleep paralysis, and for some people it is fearful, especially if you're living in a haunted house or a supernatural like heavy area and it's being caused by something dark. But sometimes sleep paralysis can be used for people in a different sense. And um, I don't know where I was really going with that, but I was just thinking about sleep paralysis not being just a bad thing is something that some people don't realize. But we'll dive into some of these explanations that I found with sleep paralysis as well, when it comes to like kind of more what it is now that we've talked about me. Um, sleep paralysis is very complex and it's still not fully been studied to its deepest depths of what it is and where our mind or body is going in the sense of what's actually happening during sleep paralysis. Um, there are a lot of scientific bases for it, but there is still no hardcore proof of the spiritual and religious interpretations of sleep paralysis. According to Brandon Peters, MD, and this is a blog post that he posted for one of his, like a medical study, and some of the REM sleep stuff that he was posting about. Now, take this with a grain of salt because, according to this article, he did use some OpenAI to write it, but it was reviewed and edited by Brandon Peters, MD, to ensure accuracy. And that's the only reason why I'm using it, but I'm only using the conclusion of it because it did kind of resonate with me. He concluded that sleep paralysis is a complex phenomenon that has inspired fear, wonder, and spiritual reflection for centuries. And that's why I'm saying that sleep paralysis isn't just like a bad thing, bad connotation. And when we get into some of the story times on this episode, we will talk about the bad and the spooky. But I want people to remember that while science has provided a detailed understanding of its physiological roots, rooted in REM sleep and disrupted brain body communication, religious and cultural interpretations remain deeply relevant for many people. And if you've watched the movie Avatar by James Cameron, all three movies, and if you dive into the spiritual sense of Avatar, you can really, like, you have, spoiler alert, you have in the second movie, Kitty, the miracle birth child of one character that has a connection to Awa, their goddess, and they are trying to discover the scientific reason of why she's having seizures and all this stuff. But when you're looking at things only from a scientific lens, you don't want to take into account the spiritual. You don't want to take into account the supernatural and all of that. And that's why there's always that miscommunication between those things. When it comes to religion and cultural interpretations for certain things, those stay relevant with people because sometimes they don't care about what the scientific explanation might be when science is saying one thing, but you're experiencing something else and science still can't prove that. What are you supposed to base it off of, right? So for some, and this is part of the article conclusion, for some, sleep paralysis is a frightening but explainable sleep disorder. For others, it is a powerful reminder of the unseen spiritual world. Neither view is necessarily wrong. Instead, they reflect different ways of understanding human experience. Ultimately, whether one sees sleep paralysis as a scientific event or spiritual encounter or both, the key to coping with it lies in awareness, support, and the tools, be they medical or religious, that help individuals make sense of their experience and reclaim their peace of mind. So, however you take sleep paralysis, just take it with whatever you feel drawn to. Make sure that you are, getting the explanations that feel right for you, because sleep paralysis still isn't this, curable thing. It's not just oh, you have sleep paralysis, let me diagnose you with this and give you this pill, right? It's not something that you can just go to a doctor for and get fixed. So if you need a spiritual explanation for it, dive into that. Let that come to you if you think it helps, because it helps others. Now, sleep paralysis has been seen in history for ages. The first clinical description of sleep paralysis was published in 1664 in a Dutch physician's case histories, where it was referred to as incubus or the nightmare. In 1977, it was discovered more than 100 previously healthy people from various South Asian communities had died mysteriously in their sleep, possibly caused by sleep paralysis. The individuals affected were dying at a rate of 92 to 100,000 from sudden, unexplainable nocturnal death syndrome. No underlying cause was ever found, and only the subsequent studies revealed a high rate of sleep paralysis and belief in the Dabsog nightmare spirit amongst members of the community. Now, this is where it gets interesting when it comes to a spiritual and supernatural part of it. The spirits and the nightmare spirits and the we'll get into incubus and succubus as well, and some of the folklore of this, but there's always an entity with a lot of sleep paralysis cases. I want to guess about 90% of them, right? Someone has seen something. And in each culture, it's called something else, but a lot of sleep paralysis cases have seen the same thing. And some cases aren't even from the same culture, right? But they describe the same thing. So, how is it that we're getting this when there's no mix of communication from some of these cultures, but they're describing the same entity appearing in their nightmare, you know? It's um it's interesting, but it also makes you think, makes you wonder, and it gives me the chills. And honestly, I hate it. So some of the folklore origins for it is um like the succubus, which is something that, or the incubus, which is something that other cultures have called the entity in your sleep paralysis, is that the succubus is descended from the ancient figure of Lilith. The earliest reference to Lilith is found in the Sumerian king list of 2400 BC. This list refers to the father of the Sumerian hero, King Gilgamesh. The child of Lilu demon, one of 4 succubi or vampire-like demons, the other 3 being demons known as Lilith, or she-demons, which bore children from their nocturnal unions with men. In these Sumerian texts, Lilith was considered a vampire and a harlot, the beautiful maiden. Once she chose a lover, he was hers forever. And so this kind of brings into the folklore of Lilith being part of the representation of like the succubus and incubus coming into the world and causing you know, these things in the night. And that's where some cultures are probably deriving these explanations from. Some of the science behind it, though, from this folklore is that the primary presentation of the succubus and nightmare and their ilk instances of awakening and unable to move, the sensation of pressure on the chest, fear, visual hallucination, and perceiving some creature or person in your immediate surroundings or directly on your body is known as sleep paralysis. And that's like the scientific term that was first used in medical literature in 1928. Sleep paralysis, which has been estimated to affect from as little as 1.7% to as much as 40% of general population, with the majority of incidents affecting students generally peaking by age 30 and appear to be associated with post-traumatic stress disorder, narcolepsy, and panic attacks. Now, this science and study is from an article by On M. Cox, published by the National Library of Medicine in July of 2015. So some of these studies could be out of date. But it was concluded in this article, as long as people have imagined what goes bump in the night, the nightmare has existed. With the advent of a scientific explanation in the term of sleep paralysis, we now know today that sleep paralysis is often recognized for what it is, in many an aberration, and for a few a symptom of more serious illnesses. But for some, like the Hmong, sleep paralysis, or more aptly, the nightmare, will always be a manifestation of evil in the twilight of slumber. So, they are concluding that even though we know what the science is behind it, there are still some cultures that refute the science. And that's okay. Because the science isn't 100% right. No matter how many tests you do, sometimes that science can change, and science is always changing. I mean, look at the leaps and bounds that we've done with the Artemis project to the moon, possibly being able to get to Mars by 2035 or something. I'm not sure what those dates were, so don't quote me on that. I was not following the news. I work too much. So so sorry. But, like science, technology, and all these things that like go quote unquote bump in the night, we don't have a full explanation on it still. And that's why sleep paralysis is so interesting, because so many people have experiences of it. Now, the LGBT spin on it and why some people of the LGBT persuasion might look at sleep paralysis a little bit differently. And for those of you who don't know, is that sleep paralysis has been interpreted through cultural and religious lenses that intersect with sexuality and gender, often stigmatizing non-normative behaviors or experiences. In Western history, this took the form of incubus and succubus legends, which were seen as demons that preyed on individuals, frequently associated with strict religious control of sexual instinct, and at times non-heteronormative, repressed, or deviant desires. So that brings into the fact that LGBT individuals might have repressed trauma and religious trauma and repressed quote unquote deviant desires, especially in history and in certain cultures where it's not okay in their culture to be gay, that they might be experiencing more sleep paralysis due to stress, anxiety, or medical reasons. And they might be seeing an incubus or succubus that is trying to prey on these desires in the night. Especially with like the demonic associations being like an incubus or succubus, normally being gendered, incubus being a man and succubus being a woman, lying underneath the covers with them, to tie into their condemned sexual behaviors of same-sex relations. And that kind of brings into like modern day, like studies indicate a connection between sleep paralysis and trauma, where it might affect LGBTQ plus people disproportionately than other individuals, because they might have sexual trauma or repressed memories of, conversion therapy or other things going on in their life. And as someone that's LGBTQ plus, maybe that is something that I experienced. Who knows? But it could be something that someone else that's listening to who is LGBTQ, if you're listening to it and have experienced sleep paralysis, and you're hearing this explanation, maybe that's it. But if not, maybe it's just a ghost haunting you. So be careful, because yeah, not all ghosts are good. But when it ties back into like all the mental health stuff and the trauma and different bipolar disorders, things like that, that also ties back to our neurodivergent lens of the podcast. Sleep paralysis being more centered in mental health and anxiety and depression and different disorders when it comes to sleep. Me being someone that has personality disorder and a touch of autism is someone that my brain could be causing me to have sleep paralysis when I'm having different episodes or stressful days, or different things going on in my head that I might not be able to cope with or understand. So that's another thing to think about. But we don't got time to think. Less thinking and more reading other people's traumatic experiences so that we don't have to feel bad about ourselves. Right? Right. This is where we transition into some Reddit stories. Now, I feel like I might be talking a little bit fast, and this is only the first episode of the podcast, and I'm trying to figure out good timing when it comes to certain things and recording at the best time for myself, and we are hopefully going to be posting weekly every Tuesday. So, thank you for making it this far if you have. But now we are going to read some stories from Reddit about sleep paralysis experiences. I'm going to go through just different sleep paralysis stuff on Reddit and read these stories. I'm not going to mention the username of the person, and I'm not going to mention any names of anyone in any of these stories. If you're listening and this is your post, then thank you for letting me read it, because it's on Reddit. It's pretty public. So, yeah. But I'm not going to mention any usernames, just OP for original poster. To try to keep it more confidential, you'll have to go hunt Reddit yourself. But let's get into it. So, one of the creepier stories that I saw was in the sleep paralysis subreddit, or one of them, and the title is "Dragged Across the House. What the hell just happened?" Hey, so I think I just had sleep paralysis. I dozed off, kinda, and suddenly felt like I was yanked out of my bed into the floor of my room. Then the door of my room opened and I was dragged throughout the whole floor of my house. I'm a teen, so I still live with my parents, and eventually was dragged into the room. I had no idea what was happening, so I tried to call out for help, but all that came out was a faint noise. I could grab onto things, and it felt like I actually was holding them, but then I would get just dragged again. This went on for a couple minutes before I was dragged back into my room and then into myself. The whole time I could hear the show I was playing going on in the background, which freaked me out because I knew I was not dreaming because of that. Is this sleep paralysis or something? That is a get the fuck out of the house, dude. What the fuck? Absolutely not. No. Um, some commenters are saying that it could be you attempted to leave your body, aka astral projection. It could have been an astral projection experience without OP knowing, and the dragging sensation could have been them, you know, leaving their body, but in an uncontrolled sense. But if there's an entity in there that was dragging you out of your body, that's some insidious shit. No, count me out. Moving on. So the next story is someone posted. This is a little bit longer one. The most disturbing sleep paralysis experience I've ever had. It happened a year ago when I was living in my old apartment. It was a very stressful time in my life because I was planning to leave the country soon to go live with my boyfriend. I was under a lot of stress and fear because of all the big changes ahead of me. Late that night, I fell asleep with my boyfriend on the phone like every night, and within a few minutes, I started to feel my whole body vibrating. Then I felt my soul detaching from my body. Soon enough, I was looking at myself sleeping in my bed, and I could see my boyfriend on the phone, asleep as well. I felt so light and so free. It wasn't my first time astral projecting, but I never really wanted it to happen. It just started occurring naturally a few years ago, so I never took the time to learn about it because I wasn't ready. I never had extreme experiences since I was always scared of going too far. I forced myself to stay cautious and remain in my apartment, just floating around and enjoying the moment. I can't really describe what I was seeing because I'm no expert and I'm never fully conscious during AP or astral projection. Most of the time, I'm still in a half asleep, half awake state, so everything is blurry and unclear. The only thing that is always clear is the beautiful feeling of being free, light, and powerful. Nothing bad happened until I came back to my body. I was lying on my side when I suddenly felt heavy arms around me like someone was hugging me. It took me a few seconds to realize it wasn't just a sensation. Someone was literally in front of me. All I could see were big white eyes with small black pupils staring at me. I could feel his heavy breath on my face and neck. He was standing so close that I couldn't see anything else of him. Just that. When you enter sleep paralysis, which usually happens after astral projection for myself, it's hard to tell how long it lasts, but this one felt like hours. The entity never moved. It stayed just close the entire time, just staring at me. I still don't know if it was trying to scare me, feed off my energy, or enter my body, but it felt curious, like it was observing me. I was terrified. I remember trying to call my boyfriend's name. I felt so small and vulnerable. At one point, I even felt violated. He had his long, heavy arms around me, and all I could see were those huge, curious eyes while feeling his heavy breath. After what felt like hours, it finally stopped and disappeared, and I, quote-unquote, woke up and started crying. I couldn't stop crying until morning. I asked my boyfriend if he had heard me panicking and calling his name, and he said no. I felt deeply disturbed afterward, and I still couldn't tell if it meant to harm me or was just intrusive and curious. After doing some research, I found that it could have been another entity that noticed me while I was astral projecting and followed me out of curiosity. I felt awful afterward. I couldn't sleep for days. It felt like all my energy had been drained, leaving me weak and vulnerable. It took a few days before I felt like myself again. Although I've had many other bad experiences with sleep paralysis, this one was the worst because of how close the entity was. After I left the country and moved in with my boyfriend, the astral projection and sleep paralysis continued. I also started having recurring dreams where the same situation would happen again and again, just with different outcomes. For a while, I felt like I was being chased by something that wanted to hurt me. For months, my boyfriend would wake me up because he could hear me mumbling things like, "Leave me alone," or "Please stop." Or he could feel me breathing heavily and panicking. Since I got pregnant, all the astral projection, sleep paralysis, and nightmares have stopped. I'm very grateful because it's already hard enough to get good sleep during pregnancy. Still, I'm curious about why it suddenly stopped. I'm also worried that it might start again after I give birth. Ooh, okay. So the first thought that I had is, oh, okay. Well, hold on. I have the chills. The first thought I had is she gets pregnant and this sleep paralysis in these episodes stop. Why? What if the entity is in her womb? Kind of out there, kind of wild. Just I just finished watching, or okay, rewatching the first season of American Horror Story Murder House, and that oh, that just makes me feel really uncomfy. It is nope. Um, and pregnancy is not something that's a strong suit as a gay man. Nope, could not be me. But sorry, but I that's just yeah. And I think we got time for one more story. Oh, so I saw this one post. I think it was from like a month ago. Is there a way to get a hot sleep paralysis demon? Like, if I'm gonna be forced to go through this every night, then at least want the thing standing over me to be hot. I'm gonna upvote that. Um, I will upvote the ones that I read as well. They're good. Um, so we'll do one more, just a short one. Um, so I personally do not like kids, especially in a horror movie atmosphere or spooky atmosphere at all. Um, but this one says 8-year-old experiencing sleep paralysis. My daughter has always had nightmares, since she was able to tell us about them at least. I think she had terrors even before she could talk. She's now 8 and has described something that sounds like sleep paralysis to me. She said she would wake up from the nightmare but couldn't get rid of it. She felt her eyes open, she felt the air on her face, but she was still stuck in the nightmare. Has anyone had sleep paralysis this young? Has anything helped? What have you done for your children struggling with these things? Thanks for the input. My first thing, OP, would be please make sure that your child isn't seeing things during the sleep paralysis. Um, and if so, just throw the whole thing out. We're not trying to get haunted in this bitch right now. At least for you. I would love to be haunted, but not with like a child there. Anytime I see a horror movie and like a child's like, "Oh, I'm talking to Timmy. Who's Timmy?" And it's like they drew a picture and it's this crazy ass fucking monster entity dark black thing. I'm like, "Is Timmy paying rent?" No. Cool. You can stay here with Timmy. I'ma leave. Like, fuck that. Absolutely not. Um so yeah, but I just can't get over the pregnancy. That one was creepy a little bit. That gave me the chills at the end. But if you are listening and want to send in your own stories about sleep paralysis, whether they're short or long, you can send them in. I actually have a new email specifically for the podcast where you can send in your own stories directly to me for me to read live during our story segments. For our podcast. So that'll be Ghosted But Gay, all one word. Ghosted, GHOSTED BUTGAY, Ghosted But Gay, at gmail.com. Feel free to send in those stories. In the subject line, just give me a little subject of, listener story or whatever, and post your story there, and then you might be featured in one of my upcoming episodes. But yeah, so let's get moving on to closing this thing out. All right. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. This is only the first episode of this podcast, and I want to try to post podcast episodes every week on Tuesday, weekly, kind of in the morning, afternoon ish, or even late at night. So they will be posted Tuesday, timing wise, not 100% sure. So just check back next week for the next episode. Um, and feel free to email me about suggestions, what you guys want to hear. This is a blooming new self-made podcast. I'm doing everything on my own, and I might have a team of people eventually. Um, but if you have suggestions for things for the podcast that you want to hear, let me know. If you want to send those in, send them into the email that was previously mentioned. Um, or you can just send in your own supernatural encounters to be featured in new segments later on as the podcast develops. If you want to send in suggestions of maybe background music, that's something that we'll probably do during some of the story times, get some like ambiance, or just have any comments, questions, concerns, please send them to the email. Obviously, if you're going to send hate emails, I appreciate the interaction. I appreciate you listening this far to even hear what the email is. So thank you for doing that. That's little weird. And if you send me hate mail, I'll just delete it, I guess, and block you. But, not my problem. But yeah, next week, next episode, we're going to be diving into the Fae, and why you should absolutely not mess with them. Or maybe do. I guess it just depends on your culture, your folklore, and how respectful you are to the Fae. And with that, I thank you. You lovely people have a wonderful day, evening, or night, whatever time it is. And I'll see you all next week. Or you'll hear me all next week. Bye bye.